how are you? I feel compelled to do this video about a book I'm reading at the moment. I just have some thoughts about it, and yeah, it's kind of, well, this is a book. It's House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski. And it's got a bit of a cult following, and the reason I know about it is because when I wrote my first book, Earthly Bodies, my editor said, "Have you read House of Leaves? I think you'd really like it." And I was like, never heard of it before, and added it to my TBR pile, my to be read pile, my virtual list online, and didn't get around to it until very recently, when I'm not sure how it happened, but I ended up requesting it from the library because I'd seen how much it was to buy new, and it's quite an expensive book. So I thought I'll get it from the library, and if I really, really like it, I can always buy it. I know it's quite a long book, that was the other reason as well. So if I don't manage to finish it in the library loan term, then I can buy it if I like the book. So that was kind of my thinking. And I've just got a few different thoughts about it, and this isn't really, it's kind of a review, I suppose, but I don't really do that many reviews, as you probably know if you're watching this, if you know me. I'm not really a book reviewer, but I just feel compelled to talk about this book. So there's so many different thoughts. So this video will probably have some cuts in it where I've probably gone on a tangent and then I've pulled myself back. It'll probably be sort of a bit disjointed for that reason, because I know that there's probably going to be things that I'll forget to say in this first bit where I'm sat down, because I don't write a script. So the first thing I want to talk about is the fact that this came out in, I think it was the year 2000, and let me just double check that. Yeah, the year 2000. And it was reprinted 3 times in the year 2000, and its debut novel, and it was just a complete, at the time, I mean, like I say, I didn't know about it, but at the time it was sold out. It was a massive hit. It's been translated in multiple different countries around the world. I'm not sure how many countries, but quite a few, like probably loads. Really good reviews. Like, there's a quote here from The Guardian on the front saying, superbly invented, a rare debut, genuinely exciting. And it had so much sort of build up, which was another reason why I didn't sort of go straight to it after my editor suggested I do, because I think it's something to with that. The way my brain works, I kind of avoid things if they've got too much of a hype. I don't want to be part of that hype. I'd rather get to something in my own time and make my own decisions about it, rather than be influenced by subculture or social media or whatever. So I've gotten to this in my own time. I mean, Earthly Bodies came out in 2021, and I was working on it for like 3 years before it came out. So I would have known about this book during those 3 years previous, because obviously that's when I'm editing it. So I probably knew about the book in 2019, 2020, and it's now 2024, and I've almost finished it. It's a 3-week library loan or 2-week library loan, and I've just renewed it. So yeah, so my thoughts are the following. Part 1 is, it's incredibly uncanny. It's a really uncanny book, and whether you know about the definition of uncanny or not, I'll just give you a brief sort of overview. It comes from the word unheimlich in German, which basically means unhomely, or not of the home. So when something isn't of the home or unhomely, it's uncomfortable, it's kind of weird, it's just very unsettling. It's not perhaps horror as in gore, or but it's very sort of insidious, sort of basically an unhomely feeling. Now, the uncanny can be presented in lots of different ways in stories, in books and short stories, films, and it's not always taken literally, as not all uncanny stories are set in the home to make it therefore unhomely when something weird happens. But this one is. So I'll get to that in a minute. But so I'll just give you some examples. Like, so Shirley Jackson, she writes a lot about sort of, I want to sort of say domestic horror, sort of uncanny, weird domestic horror, people in houses where they live and weird stuff going on. It's uncanny, it's a bit ghost-like, it's a bit horror, but it's definitely, her work definitely would come under uncanny. Jeff Vandermeer, his stuff, his sort of climate fiction, his eco-horror, it's all recognisably sort of stuff that you know, like the world around us, but it's with a little soupçon of weird, which makes it uncomfortable because you think you know the world that he's presenting, but then these very strange things are happening and very strange creatures are around or whatever. So I mean, those two of my favourite writers, two of my favourite writers anyway. I love it when stories don't answer all the questions that the reader has. I know some people really don't like that, but for me, that is one of my real sort of, I don't like things tied up in a nice neat bow at the end of the book. I like to sort of be stewing on it, be thinking about it. I mean, it could be the end of, the end of a book or a film. I mean, David Lynch is a great example of a creator, a director and writer who works in that sort of uncanny sort of world. He creates these uncanny worlds. So going back to the House of Leaves, I don't know how long this video is going to be. Going back to the House of Leaves, what he does, the author, he sets this up as uncanny. I mean, not explicitly, not saying it anywhere, but the fact that this family move into a house. So straight away you've got a family moving into a house. It's a family of 4, a man, a woman, 2 kids, a boy and a girl. It's kind of your typical, I don't want to say typical anymore because it really isn't average, but it's kind of what we're all sort of brought up on to be normal. That's kind of what we think of as being normal, like a cis marriage, heterosexual marriage, 2 kids. That's kind of what we're all brought up on as being normal. We know it's not normal. We know it's just one of a multiple version of people having relationships and families. But the fact that he's using this cliche, for want of a better word, I wouldn't say cliche is the right word, but he's using this sort of archetype, that's a better word, archetype to sort of set up the story. So you've got a family with 2 young kids moving into a new home to try and have a new start, to try and repair the relationship between the man and the woman. So straight away you've got the home aspect of the uncanny, and then quite quickly you've got the aspect of something weird happening in that home. So it's very uncanny, which is what the point I'm labouring here. So the other part of that is the way this is structured is multiple points of view. It's almost like books within a book. And before I read it, I knew I'd kind of read bits about it, and people had said it's quite complicated, and I was quite intimidated by it. But if you know me, I like a challenge, and this year 2024 seems to be about, for me anyway, reading intimidating books, reading books that I would normally sort of shy away from, or feel like I don't have time to read, or feel like I can't get deep enough into the story because my attention span or whatever. So I've written on my Substack recently about longer books that I've read. So Wolf Hall's about 600 pages. There's a couple of others that I can't think of off the top of my head that are also quite long, that I probably would have shied away from like a year ago, 2 years ago, 10 years ago easily. So this year seems to be the year of me reading these bigger books, which is unusual for me, especially with ADHD. But so that was another part of it. I just thought I felt ready for it almost. I felt like I was able to take it on. And the way it's structured is sort of layers of time. So there are multiple writers to this book. And it's sort of how can I explain it now without sounding stupid? It's like there's a documentary that's been made about the family. The man in the family is a documentary maker, a photographer, a photojournalist, and he's very much used to using cameras, using videos to communicate ideas, and he's the award winner, all this sort of stuff. And so when the family move into the house, he documents that because that's what he does. He's wanted to sort of, save those memories for himself, but I don't know, maybe he wanted to sort of think about how a family acts when they first move into a house, and maybe he thought he might make a documentary of it at a later date. In the book, it's not really clear why he does it beyond the fact that he just wanted to document it. So he sets up cameras in the house to sort of, not in a sort of weird sort of I need to keep an eye on my family way, but in a way where they can just treasure these memories of them moving into the house. And they also do video diaries. So part of the reason I'm making this video is because it feels quite appropriate. It feels appropriate to make a video because it's kind of a theme within the book. So that's kind of where I'm going with it. I've just felt quite inspired by it. But this footage, and the footage is sort of found footage, and there's a whole documentary that's created with this footage, and within the book it's discussed whether this is fiction or fact, and there's a whole debate about, has this photojournalist got millions of dollars to try and do all these special effects? And there's obviously debate on both sides. And so it's from that point of view, as in it's trying to analyse what this documentary is, what this piece of video is. Is it real? Is it fiction? Like with Blair Witch, it's kind of, you watch Blair Witch and you're almost like, is that real? It's so sort of visceral, it feels like it's real. So what he's done here, he's managed to do this in novel form. So you've also got a lot of footnotes within the text, and it's a certain type of story, and I will remember it and I'll put it here or something in a minute. It's a certain type of book where the reader has to be more it's like an interactive book, like not quite choose your own adventure, because I loved those as a kid, but it is sort of, you do have to kind of lift up the book sometimes. You have to turn it upside down to read some stuff. There's a couple of bits where you have to read it in a mirror. There's some pages where doesn't look like there's a lot going on. You can see here there's a bit of text, but it's all done for a reason. So this brings me, I'll come back to this in a minute, but I'm just going to go on to this other point now because it just popped into my head. This brings me to the fact that this book was published in the year 2000, and he was working on it for 10 years before he got it published. And as much as I've probably raved about this book already, this video is 13 minutes already, and I've sort of said a lot but also said nothing. So make of that what you will. But this book was published in 2000, and the publishing world was very different then, very, very different then. And I just find it fascinating that a publishing house has taken a chance on a book like this. Trying to see, it was Doubleday, which I don't know if they actually technically exist anymore. They've probably been merged with one of the other publishing houses, because they've kind of all merged now. But so it's published in the year 2000, and it was a huge investment for the publishing house. Because of the way it's printed in multiple different fonts. In the original there was, let me read it to you. There's been different editions basically. So there's been a full colour edition, which is where some particular words were printed in. I'm not going to tell you what they are because I might spoil it. So some words were printed in blue, some were printed in red, some were kind of struck out. There was even braille and colour palettes. And then another edition had no braille and only 2 colours. And this edition that I've got, obviously it's a library edition, it's a black and white edition. There's no braille, there's black and white plates for the images, and there's no colour. And then there's another edition as well, which it says it's incomplete, which I don't really know what that means. But so there's multiple editions, and I know from publishing my own books that it's not a cheap way of running a business. It's not a way of running a business. You have to think, how many pages am I doing? How much is it going to cost me? What size is the book going to be? And this is not it's a big book. It's not a 7x5 inch paperback, which is I think what mine are. So it's a big book. There are literally, there's about 700 pages in here. Not all of them are sort of, narrative. Some of it's indexing, some of it's images, and some of the pages, like you saw, are quite blank. But it's the fact that is so, what's the word, sort of audacious almost. I'm going to publish this book and it's going to actually have blank pages in it. I'm going to publish this book and it's going to make the reader turn the book upside down. And to me, that is so sort of, it's both inspiring because, wow, somebody actually got a publishing house to publish this as they wanted it to be. So he's obviously created this book in this particular way and wanted it to be like this, and the publishing house was like, yes, I love it, I'm going to publish it just as you want it. I mean, I don't know what the backstory, there might be other stuff going on here, but I don't know. And the publishing house were happy to have blank pages, and also have colour print versions as well. And to me, now that I just don't know if that would happen now. I just don't know if this book was written now and the author came to publishers now, would they say yes, let's do it, or would they be like, no, it's too much of a risk? I'm leaning towards the latter, because there's just the risk sort of side of things in publishing is just really just low risk. They just want sure things all the time. That's why there's so many celebrity memoirs and celebrity writers, because they know there's a name there and they know they can sell the books. Anyway, so it's fascinating to me how this even got published, which is just inspiring as an author, because it sort of says, create what you want to create. Even if it looks bonkers, even if it looks kind of totally different to any book that's come before. So that part is inspiring. The other part of it is that this guy is a white male. So for me, I'm thinking, if a woman had written this and went to a publishing house in the year 2000, would they have said yes? I don't know. I think it's interesting to see that this is a book from a white man, and I've not done enough research into this topic yet, but I'm wondering if there's any books of this ilk where you have to interact with it written by women. So that's kind of something for me to go and look at, or maybe you can leave me a comment and you might know someone who's done something like this. But it kind of labours that point again about men, especially, well, white men, let's be honest, having more creative autonomy than anybody else, and given more chances than anybody else, and being audacious because they're a white man. So that's kind of something that I'm thinking about as well. So I'm kind of loving the book, but also having all these questions. Because obviously it's a white male protagonist in the book as well. There's multiple white male protagonists, and one of the narrators is there's quite a bit of objectifying women in from one of the narrators, and I know from what reviews I've read, because I have read some reviews before I started it, some people will give up at that point when they're just reading this particular narrator in it. They get really annoyed with him and they just don't want to read anymore because of what he's like. But I obviously have persevered and I've gone past that point now, and it's obviously telling his story as well. So I mean, I always try and read at least sort of a third of the book to try and decide before I do not finish. But I hadn't thought at any point I didn't want to finish this. I knew from like the first 2 or 3 pages that I really liked it, and it was really, really for me. But what he says actually, the first page is this. So I think I basically knew it was for me when I read this. Let me show you. This is not for you. That basically said to me that it was for me, because that's how my brain works. But yeah, I mean, you can obviously tell it's quite inspired me, this book. And thank you to Vicky, my editor, for recommending it, you know, those years ago. But it's even got me thinking about the number 4, because even the tarot cards that are 4, they're all very kind of steady. 4 sort of symbolises something very stable, the square, and the house. So it's like the 4 walls of a house, and then the 4 walls, the 4 people in the house, and all these 4s of kind of making me think about, I don't know what I'm thinking about with that yet, but it's just another question. So this book has basically brought up loads of questions for me about what I'm writing, about what I'm producing myself, about why, about how to actually structure a book, and what things are possible. I mean, I think if I was to do something like this, it'd be really complicated to do. There are obviously ways of doing it. There's loads of software available now for self-publishers to use. That, you know, you could create something like this, I'm sure, but it would be an expensive exercise because of the time it would take. You probably need extra help, and etc, etc. But anyway, all this is to say, I might have covered everything here. I'm gonna come back to this in a bit and later on today and think if I've missed anything out, because I probably have. But this is to say that if you are tempted to read House of Leaves, I would definitely read it. Read it. It's just, I mean, especially if you like the uncanny, especially if you're into horror. One book it has reminded me of, I was talking to a lady on Instagram over the weekend, and she agreed. It was Paranzi by Susanna Clarke, which was out a couple of years ago. I think I read it last year or the year before. Paranzi is like, it's a really similar place, for want of a better word. Okay, I'm back. I got interrupted and then I got distracted, and it's a different day, so it's the following day now. But I was talking about Paranzi by Susanna Clarke, and which is not horror at all really. I mean, it's a bit odd, it's a bit unsettling at times, but I wouldn't call it a horror book. It is a literary novel, but as I was saying, it's the sort of placeness, the sort of what it's talking about is kind of really, really similar. This, I don't want to give you any spoilers, but if you've read Paranzi, I think you would really enjoy House of Leaves, and vice versa. If you've not read Paranzi but you read House of Leaves, go and read Paranzi and you'll see what I mean. This kind of carnivorous sort of archaic, almost archaeological, mysterious place with multiple spaces within it, Yeah, and as Paranzi is, wandering around this place. But so it's kind of like these two books are like two sides of the same coin, or they're both talking about this mysterious situation, which I don't want to tell you about because I'm not doing any spoilers. But yeah, so I think, I mean, and some of the reviews I've read of House of Leaves have been quite, they've been quite sort of derogatory about it because they've struggled to follow what's going on. And I would, if you are going to read it, I would suggest that you focus on the Navidson, I think it's the Navidson documentary or the Navidson Inquiry, or the main section of the book is where most of it happens. And then there's a secondary sort of narrative within that, mainly in the footnotes, that kind of, it does play into it. But there are, in my opinion, there are some footnotes and some sections that on my first read, I don't really feel they add anything other than making the reader feel unsettled, other than making the reader feel sort of just weird. So which was obviously his intention, Mark Danielewski, I can't say that name, I hope I'm saying it right, which was part of his intention, because the other thing about this, which I didn't talk about yesterday, is that one of the reasons it's impressed me so much is that it's like a piece of art but in literature form. And coming from an art background, I mean, my degree show was a piece of writing, and which it's, I mean, now it seems obvious I was going to end up being a writer, but at that point I thought I was, a more traditional artist. But as I say, I started in sculpture. I ended up going through these different mediums, and in the end, I was presenting something that was a film. Like in this book, it was a film. It was a documentary. It was sort of a bit kind of found footage. It was a lot of text, observational text, and things like that. So for me to sort of see this as the person I am, who is an artist, a creative, a writer, this book has kind of blown me away in that way, because as I said earlier, it's kind of, it's great to see what is possible in the book form. You get people that make zines and stuff like that, and they're amazing. I love a good zine, but it's obviously on a much smaller scale, with a much smaller readership, and something like this, which was a huge hit, and people obviously really liked it. So it's good to see that there are other people who are wanting to create sort of similar things, and it's kind of really inspiring. And really, in 10 years' time, when I look back on this video, who knows, I might have done my own sort of weird book that you have to turn upside down to read, and open flaps and read it through this particular lens, or I don't know. But it's kind of stimulating all my neurons, thinking this is really exciting. And yes, the story's good. Some of the things maybe don't add much to the story, but overall I found it really, really inspiring. And the other thing I just wanted to finally mention is to going back to the number 4, which I mentioned earlier in the video. I don't want to edit this that much, because I'm not going to edit this bit in. I'm just going to add it on this end, almost like a footnote. But I was talking about the number 4 earlier, and the other thing about the number 4 is that in astrology, the 4th house symbolises the home, which is another kind of, it's just another bit of a weird connection. Now, I don't know if the author had any intentions around that, or I'm just reading meaning into something that perhaps isn't there, but I'm reading it through obviously my own experiences, my own life, my own interests, and it's just adds to the levels of uncanny for me. So it's just another sort of light bulb, it's kind of another sort of ding, 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 this book does this, 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 and this, and it also does this, this, and this, without even perhaps the intention of doing so, which is really interesting. And I think that's everything. So this video is probably going to be getting on for 30 minutes. Hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think. Let me know if I have sold House of Leaves to you, and who knows, if this is of interest to a few people, maybe we can do like a buddy read or a read along together, and I'll read it again happily. I'll probably see more in it the second time. Maybe if you are feeling intimidated by it, you can ask me some questions, and I can tell you how I sort of read it. Yeah, so thank you for watching. If you made it to the end, I appreciate it.